Hello, everybody, and welcome to our PvP Developer Q&A. My name is Josh Allen, a.k.a. Community Manager Lore, and joining me here today, none other than Mr. Senior Designer Brian Holinka himself. How's it going?
Good. How are you doing today?
Doing good.
Great. Awesome. Very excited to talk about everything we're doing in Legion and PvP.
Yeah, so before we get into all the questions, obviously we got a ton of questions in asking about the beta and class balance. It was kind of the biggest bulk of questions that we got was about like class balance in the beta. Do you want to just give a quick second to talk about like where things stand currently on the beta in regards to class balance?
Yeah, certainly. I think probably the first thing to say is we're not in a place on beta with class balance that we're happy with right now, obviously. It's still a work in progress. And there have been a number of things during the course of beta that kind of affected class balance that we're still kind of working on. So, I mean, obviously the class design team has done a lot of things to classes. This expansion made a lot of changes, and they've done a really good job, but it's kind of made things a little like, okay, what should we balance? You know, because we're not quite sure yet.
Yeah.
So that's kind of been sorting itself out. It's in a good place now, and so it's a known quantity, and so we've started a lot of tuning work. Artifacts is something new to the game, and for us, we wanted to make sure that we were tuning the game for when players are at their maximum power level. So the templates that we created on beta all have max level artifacts, right? Level 50 artifacts.
Right.
It's very unlikely that when the game launches, people will have full artifacts, full power artifacts for a while.
Yeah.
So in terms of priority for tuning for the team, it's kind of not the highest priority right now. So it's something we can kind of do over time. And so as a result, the artifacts are kind of not necessarily all tuned, as well as they're going to be.
Right. You're just kind of focusing at the moment on how things will be at launch.
Exactly.
And then we can ease into the artifacts as people start to unlock
stuff. So we've made a lot of changes. We have a new system in Legion. It's called a PvP multiplier for every spell. We've never had this. We can very easily make an adjustment and say, oh, this spell is problematic, whether it's a heal or a damage spell. We've had to do that through a kind of ugly process in the past with some scripts on our spells. But now we have something we can do that with very easily. And so we've done that for a lot of artifacts that were problematic. There were things like cauterizing blink, which was a heal for fire mages. So we reduced that impact by about half or more. Doom Winds is an enhancement shaman artifact trait. The active ability that really create a huge power spike. Yeah. So we've reduced that impact. So there are a number of those things that we've done that I know over time are going to kind of get finessed for the game overall. But in the meantime, we've done that. So and another case would be tanks, where tanks are tuned very appropriately for PvE, but they're problematic for PvP. So through the template system and other methods, tanks are doing 25% less damage in PvP. They have lower stamina than other classes to bring their health pools down. If they have problematic things like their masteries, we've adjusted those. So there are a lot of things that we're doing, and now we're really starting to change values on individual spells. I think about 80 plus spells have PvP multipliers right now. Cool. And we'll certainly have to work with you guys to figure out how we tell the community about that. Yeah. But that's the state of things. So I think, and the last thing that really has affected balance is that PvP template system. The stat templates is a new system. It's something we just created in Legion, and so it's had problems. Like we recently discovered last week that healers and casters were not getting the full stats that they would normally get from their weapons. So they were untuned by about undertuned by almost 30%. Right. So healers were. I mean, so that has a big impact on the gameplay. Yeah. So right now, I think you're going to see us doing a lot more tuning. That's like the sole focus of one of our designers is the PvP balance right now, and we're going to be changing those numbers. So I think it'll get in a better place over the next month leading up to launch.
Cool. One of the other sort of threads that was going through a lot of those questions was talking about like utility spells. Yeah. And there's been sort of this concern from a lot of members in the community that it's kind of almost like a PvE damage race in PvP in the Legion beta. And obviously a lot of that tuning just hasn't happened yet. Do you think that that's something that as we start getting closer to launch and you can really start hammering these different PvP tuning specific stuff. Is that something that's going to help that?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it was early on in the beta, it was the case that damage was so high that it was just like, at least in Arena, it was run in, everybody like blow all their cooldowns, and then somebody, you know, only one man is left standing, or woman. But now I think, because that had a lot to do with how undertuned the healers were, and maybe just how high damage was. So, yes, I think when we kind of lower the tuning on the damage, that'll allow the opportunity for other things, crowd control, utility, and stuff to come more into play.
Cool. All right, well, let's start getting into these questions. The first one here comes from Latifes, who asked, why is PvP loot being exclusively rewarded by random strongboxes with no deterministic, such as vendors, system as an alternative? So obviously in Legion, just to, I guess, set the stage for people who may not be aware yet, you don't go to a vendor and buy your gear anymore. You actually, you win around, you get a box. Inside that box could be a piece of gear, could be something. Is it I guess, like, maybe clarify that system a little bit.
Sure,
Is it always a piece of gear? Or?
So it's not always a piece of gear.
Okay.
So it's the way the gear is rewarded. We often talk about the strong boxes, but it is actually rewarded on victory. So when you reward, like when you, it's almost like the personal loot system.
Okay.
Like rather than getting a box and opening it, we give it to you. So if you win a battleground, if you win a skirmish, if you win an arena or ranked arena, you get a box. Now, or you don't get a box, you get a reward, sorry. You get a piece of gear. The box contains other cool, fun items that we have. So we actually moved away from the gold, silver, bronze, strong box system to just a single strong box that contains some fun stuff like potions or marks of honor, which I think we'll talk about later, and those sorts of things. But yes, so you do get gear, and the gear uses the new kind of system that the whole game is using, where it has an opportunity to increase an eye level every time you get a piece of gear. So it may go up 5, it might be 805, it might be 810, it might be 850, depending on how lucky you are. The reason we wanted to go away from a vendor system was 2 reasons. One, we felt like it was a pretty flat experience. It was not, like earning a bunch of currency, grinding away, going to a vendor, getting a piece of gear, like a weapon or chest piece. Like those initial things felt very good. You get the sword, or you get as part of your set piece bonus. That might feel good, but over time, if you keep doing that, it's pretty boring.
Right. Like once you've got your weapon and maybe like you've got your helm and your shoulders, after that it's like, okay, I guess I'm going to do a bunch more PvP and I'll buy a ring.
Right,
or something.
exactly.
Like it doesn't feel as cool. I can see that.
So whereas like when things are less predictable, it's a little bit more exciting when you get a good piece of gear, and it's a little disappointing when you don't get the gear you want. And that, I think playing these games, it is an emotional experience, and that's what we want. So on one hand, we want to have a little bit of unpredictability. On the other hand, we're very sympathetic to the fact that this is a community that for a very long time has just, been getting their gear through a very predictive system.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to put in things to protect against a lot of bad luck.
Okay.
So, when you get a piece of gear, we really downgrade the chance that you'll get that slot again, that piece of gear again, so that it's very unlikely you'll get the same slots over and over in time. So it's just more about, you're going to get gear pretty much at the same rate, but it's just the order it comes in is a little less predictable. The other thing that does for us is we're trying to get to a place where what's always been complicated for World of Warcraft PvP is we live in a world where there's a PvE part of the game, and that has a very unpredictable loot system. And so building a gear system that allowed good crossover was very difficult, because the amount of power that we gave you through this deterministic system, it always had to be less than the undeterministic system. So being a little less predictable allows us to create gear that's on par with PvE gear. So I think that's something we are very looking forward to having this first time around. Yeah,
and it's also worth mentioning that with the new the gear scaling, the way the gear scaling works in PvP now, where it's just a function of your item level, and you just get a small stat bonus based on that. It's not like right now, I know a lot of people are just sort of continually grinding and hoping to get that right accolade trinket. Because
Right.
They want to get the one with the right stat distribution.
Yep.
That doesn't, the stats on it for PvP don't matter at all.
That's right, yes.
In Legion, because as long as it's a decent item level, you're getting that stat bonus anyway.
Yep.
So.
And certainly, just to even go further on that, when we talk about what our system is like, our gear system, the stat template system, when you walk into an instance PvP like a Battleground or a skirmish, we basically set your stats at a target of like 850. This is
Right.
at the launch of Legion.
Okay.
So we're giving you stats that make you on par, look like you have 850 gear equipped. And the way, so we set everybody that way, and then we say, what's your average item level? Compared to a baseline, and that baseline at launch will be 800.
Okay.
So if your average item level is 800, your stats are going to be like 850.
Okay.
Now what we do is every average point of eye level above that, we increase your stats by 0.1%.
Right. So every 10 item levels is 1%.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you have an average item level of 900, which no one will,
Right.
because that's like you have legendaries in every slot, and that's not possible right at the launch, right? So if you have that, you will have a stat boost of 10%.
Right.
So that's equivalent, like we always say that one eye level is equal to 1% power. So that means if you are at eye level 900, your power will be at like 860. So
Right.
the spectrum of power is going to be somewhere in the range of 850 to 860.
Yeah.
So no matter what your gear is, really, when you go into Battlegrounds and arenas, things are going to be on pretty close on par.
Right.
And I know there's some concern with World PvP, and that's kind of like what World PvP is. I mean, we just let things hang out.
Yeah.
And certainly there will be some big power gaps there, and we are willing to accept that.
Okay. Cool. Let's keep moving on through these questions. You kind of talked about this one a little bit already. We'll pull it up anyway. It comes from Red October, who said, is PvP going to award Titanforged gear?
Yes, the answer is yes. Whenever you get a piece of gear from a Battleground arena or whatever, basically whenever you're awarded a piece of gear,
Right.
like the rest of the game, it has a chance to be Warforged or Titanforged. I think Titanforged is when it's just kind of a name that gets used when something is 15 high levels or higher.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so
Ian actually made a post on the forums that kind
Yes.
of explained that a little bit.
yeah, it's a great post, and I think PvPers should read that as well. So the answer is yes.
Cool. Let's move on to the next question, which comes from Villax TV on Twitter, who asked, will gearing up with PvP gear and then using it in PvE still be viable in Legion?
It will, but maybe a bit different than in Warlords. In Warlords, I know we have this big conquest cap, and so a lot of people, they go in, they earn a bunch of conquest, and now they have 690 gear,
Right.
and that kind of gets them an entry. It'll be a bit different. I think what's nice about the system in Legion is, yes, if you are good in PvP, you'll have gear that you can then take to really good PvE content, but it's not such a gimme anymore.
Right,
So
yeah.
it's not as free. So certainly what's nice about the new system is that it's all about eye level PvP gear, gives you good eye level gear, and you can always bring that to PvE.
Cool. Yeah, that's actually really interesting. It sort of gives you multiple avenues to gear up your character in Legion, where maybe even if you're a raider, who's also really good at PvP and you enjoy doing PvP, it might make sense to mix more PvP into your gearing process so that you have that option. So that's
really, it lets you
kinda
supplement what you normally do as a PvE player with PvP.
cool. And vice versa as well.
Yep, that's right.
Question here from Wolf, who asked, with the removal of honor, will the old PvP gear switch over to costing gold like previous Justice or Valor gear, or is there something else set up for it?
So honor and conquest points are going away in Legion, and they'll be converted to gold.
Okay.
Very similar to how seasons normally end. But we didn't want to, with the dawn of the new transmog system, it's going to be really cool to like go out and like get gear sets. And so we thought it would kind of be honestly boring. I know some people want this, but it would be really boring if you could just take a bunch of gold, go to a vendor, and unlock every PvP look ever.
Right, yeah.
I think it's important that you do PvP. So what we have coming out of those strong boxes I mentioned before are marks of honor.
Okay.
So all those gear looks that were previously available for honor are now purchased with what are called marks of honor, a variable number of marks of honor. So by doing any instance PvP, you earn marks of honor, and then you can go buy those looks for your transmog.
Sweet. Next question, and I suppose it's worth mentioning that's only for the Warlord's gear. Is that only the Warlord's gear?
No, it's all previous expansions.
All previous expansions.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. But then obviously not the Legion gear because
not
that's
the Legion gear.
That's
right. That's coming through the
talking
about.
Yep. Cool. Question from Shad, who asked, now that PvP gear is equalized for all players, what will be the incentive to do rated BGs or arena?
Yep. So I think the first point is that we think it's important that a lot of players feel like doing rated PvP, like the average player. It's cool to have a place where, it's a little bit different than the quick play random Battlegrounds skirmish where things are maybe a little more intense. And we think it's good to get general player participation in there so that they have that experience, but also it just overall helps the rating system work to have, in
order for there to be someone who's the best, you have to have a bunch of people that aren't the best.
That's
basically.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we think the thing that motivates the average player will be two things. One is gear. And the second is your earning honor to increase your honor level. Rated Battlegrounds, there are two ways we're doing that. One, every bracket in the game, skirmish, random battleground, 2v2, they all reward honor. And they also have a first of the day bonus. So every time you do a bracket, you get basically double the normal honor that those things reward for winning. Second, rated brackets all offer about 50% more honor than the unrated versions.
Okay.
And so if you're interested in honor, it's a very efficient way to do it.
Yeah.
Second is that rated content is a very efficient way to earn higher eye level gear. You can still get high eye level gear from random battlegrounds through that Titanforge system that we were talking about earlier, but the chance to get that stuff is higher in the rated battlegrounds. So players just care about their character's power and their eye level, and so I think that would be attractive for them to do that.
Yeah, and I think you were saying somewhere previously that chance to get that higher item level gear actually increases with your rating as well.
That's correct, yes.
So the higher rated you are, the higher chance. So there's a real raw incentive to actually push for a higher rating.
Not only just to do it, but also to try to get better at it.
Yeah, definitely. That's really cool. Next question comes from Cucumber Hunter on Twitter. Who said, with this new PvP system, will the PvP season lengths be tied to raid tier releases, or will they be independent of one another? So in terms of like, when does the season start? When does the season end? Are we still tied to when a raid comes out, or is this something we can actually do separately now?
Yes, we are and we are not. So on one hand, seasons are going to be tied to raid tiers always, because that's kind of what our production schedule is. That's when we produce new content, when we increase the item levels across the game, when we create new armor sets and things like that. So we'll always have seasons in a way tied to the raid tiers for that reason. However, we think that the PvP seasons would benefit from being a little shorter than the raid tiers typically are, those raid tier typical schedules. Like, I think a lot of players, they really like the beginning of the season when they're like the meta has changed and they can gear up and it's kind of, there's a lot of discovery there. And then they like the end of the season where it's like, now I'm trying to get my titles and everybody's queuing to. So I think that's good, but I think it's probably twice as long as it needs to be.
Yeah, you end up with that big gap in the middle where it's not the start of the season where everything's new and fresh and shiny, and it's not the end of the season where there's these impending rewards. It's just sort of like you can play, but there's not a real like impetus to do it.
Exactly. So that's why we're doubling the number of seasons.
Oh, cool.
Basically. So halfway through a raid tier, this one season will end and a new season will start.
Okay, cool.
So they'll be, somewhere in the 10 to 15 week range. Don't quote me on that. Don't try to figure out like when the patches are coming out based on Holinka said.
I'm writing all of this down.
It's just a good target, and based on historical data of how long raid tier stuff works, that's approximately how. So I think that'll be cool to have kind of that end of season experience more often.
Okay, cool. So I guess just to sort of recap that, maybe just to make sure my head is wrapped around it, when a raid tier comes out, there will be a new PvP season every time there's a raid tier, but then there will also be another new season before the next one.
About halfway through every raid tier, a new season will start.
Excellent. I look forward to
and good
all
luck
of the...
on hunting down those cucumbers. Cucumber hunter.
I look forward to all of the conspiracy theories about, the new PvP season is starting. It must mean that this patch is coming out on this day.
Yes, that's right.
That'll be excellent.
Based on Holinka's 10 to 15. Kappa.
Okay, next question comes from Hanazono, who asked, why don't the PvP templates or talents activate in all PvP situations, such as duels? And I know we got a lot of people asking about that for world PvP as well.
Yeah, it's a good question. First, PvP talents, this is actually two separate things.
Okay.
PvP templates and PvP talents. The templates being the stat templates and the target eye level that we shoot you towards, and talents being all the honor talents. Honor talents do activate in all PvP situations.
Okay.
Anytime you're hit by another player, we determine you to be in PvP. Anytime you're hit by another player or hit another player, you are in PvP combat.
Right.
And during that time, honor talents do activate.
Okay, cool.
PvP templates do not activate out in the world. Like I said, I think it's the honor talents, we feel like we can adjust them such that a way that they don't offer such a huge advantage to PvE situations that, you'll have this buddy who just pings you constantly to give you honor talents.
Right.
But like I said, those stat templates are 850 stat templates. So if it was, you could move up in power to eye level 850 just by a guy running around tapping you, I think people would do that. So we don't want that to happen. Also, like I said before, we need a part of World of Warcraft where, like I said, everything can just hang out, like where the game's a little crazy. And World PvP is that place for us. We there's a spectrum of like how much we care about balance and like skill or whatever. And like rated arenas is like over here, and World PvP is like way over here, and like random Battlegrounds is in the middle. So that's just kind of the situation.
Okay, cool.
But last thing I would say is the stat templates probably should activate on duels, and that's something we'll look into.
Okay, cool. Next question, also on the stat templates, comes from Janelope, who asked, why was the choice made to not allow players any tuning of stats on the PvP templates?
Yeah, I've seen this a lot too. It's a good question. I think it's one of those trade-offs we had. We felt like we could provide a lot of character customization in honor talents, and so we thought that would provide it. There are some secondary stats that are kind of problematic secondary stats for some specs that are problematic. Most notably, mastery can often create situations that are overly bursty. They're more than we want in PvP. So being able to set those manually lets us do that. And it's just a lot cleaner for us to say, hey, all stats are set by us, rather than do some funky like your gear matters but not this much, and we tune these things and this stat separately. So we just felt like this was a cleaner way to do it. I certainly could see a world in the future where we create some honor talents that perhaps increase certain secondary stats over others, and if people are interested in that, let us know. But right now, we just feel like it's a lot more manageable to do that. And there is a place for you to have character customization in the honor talents.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember, like you were talking about specific stats being problematic. I remember a while ago we were kind of talking about the Destruction Warlock Mastery, which it's sort of a random, like, sometimes you get a small 10% bonus. Sometimes you get like a 60% bonus or something like that. Yeah, I don't remember the exact numbers, so don't quote me on that. But
not don't quote me's today.
Yeah, exactly. Just don't quote any of this. No matter. Right. No,
just kidding. That WoW had people are like, oh.
But yeah, we were talking about the Destruction Mastery, and we were like, how is this going to make sense in PvP if just like a Chaos Bolt just randomly one-shots people sometimes? It was like, well, we just won't give them any mastery. Right. Like, we have that option to just say, you just don't have any mastery. This thing does not factor in PvP. And it is important to be able to do stuff like that. So it's talking about those PvP tuning knobs. Here's a question from Chacher, who asked, with the new PvP tuning quote-unquote knobs introduced in Legion, does this mean players should expect more frequent balance changes to prevent some specs from underperforming or overperforming for long periods of time? And I guess maybe even before we get into the direct answer to this question, it might be a good idea. We talked about it a little bit earlier, but we've said a lot over the past few months that there's all sorts of new PvP tuning knobs.
Right.
But what does that actually mean?
Sure. There's two main things. The first is the PvP templates, which we've referenced a few times today, which are when you enter an instance PvP environment, we set all your stats.
We can just we pick exactly what
those are. We say you have this much strength, you
Yeah.
have this much mastery, we have this much stamina, this much armor, or whatever. We generally have made that to match, like our starting point was a character in 850 eye level gear. But, for example, there were arms warrior mastery increases a lot of damage. So we've reduced their mastery, but increased crit and haste for them or things like that.
And that can even be something, correct me if I'm wrong, but that sounds like it can even be something we're not necessarily directly tied to what the stat budget would be at 850. So if someone's just if a certain spec is just dying too easily, we don't have to reduce their damage in order to increase their stamina.
Like if we wanted to increase their stamina, we would do that. And if we wanted it to if the biggest example of this was there are a lot of specs oftentimes that are underperforming in PvE. In raiding environments, yet doing great in PvP.
Yeah,
I think Frost
Arms Warrior is a good example of that.
Yeah, and Frost Death Knights have been an example.
Knights, yeah.
And so when the class team needs to come in and buff certain spells on Frost Death Knights, we can then just say, oh, okay, well, we'll lower the strength on Frost Death Knights to kind of counteract that. The other is the PvP multipliers, which we now have per spell effect.
Yeah.
And that allows us to say, we don't like cauterizing blink in PvP. We're going to reduce its damage by half.
Cool.
So to answer this question about how often can we expect the balance changes, I would like to see us do it more often, and I hope we will. All of the knobs that we've created, we did it in such a way that they're more easily hot fixable than we've had in the past, and we want to do that.
Yeah.
Oftentimes we'd want to make a change in the past, but it somehow affected PvE, so it was there's a lot of struggle to do that. But now we're kind of able to do it and not affect PvE in any way, and that lets us have more freedom to do this. So I certainly hope so.
Yeah, it's maybe worth. You mentioned how we had to do things through hotfixes in the past, and sometimes that was more difficult. Just to give a little bit of insight into that process, to put some context into what he's saying. Oftentimes that means we're writing, basically rewriting how a spell works.
Right.
And then we have to run that over to the QA team to make sure, and they're going to test that like crazy to make sure that rewriting how the spell works doesn't now mean that it doesn't work.
Exactly.
But now with these specific systems in place, we can just say, we just changed this number from a 20 to a 30.
Right.
And send that over. QA can go, yep, it's a 30 now. And we just send it out.
Yep,
so
exactly. That's exactly right.
That's awesome. All right, let's move on. Next question comes from Gorbala on Twitter, who asked, what's the reasoning for gating PvP talents? And what do you say to those who feel some PvP talents seem or feel necessary?
We thought that in the honor system one of the biggest things we wanted was compelling rewards. The honor system was about, hey, let's find a way for players to feel like, hey, I'm going to go do Battlegrounds and I can continue to, get something that feels great, but not it be gear all the time. And so we needed some compelling rewards, and that meant some player power in those honor talents. Now, it's the fact in any reward system that in order for a reward to feel good when you get it, it probably is going to feel bad when you don't have it. That's just life, right? And certainly there are some people who would say, well, some of these things feel like in order to be competitive, I need this. And we're sympathetic to that. But so the way we've tried to soften that blow, especially for people who are prestiging and they lose all their talents, is we've tried in those first 10 levels. There are 50 honor levels total. And in the first 10 levels, we try to give you an honor talent in in each row. There are six rows of honor talents. So we give you 1 talent in every row by honor level 10.
Okay.
Also, the amount of honor to get to honor level 10 is very low. It can get to honor level 10 very quickly.
Okay.
So we kind of get you up to theoretically full power very quickly. And then the other 2 rows are more about customization and situational options.
Okay.
So I think to answer this question, I think there are some things, some trade-offs to a system like that, but we think it feels good to get something and make yourself feel more powerful, and that's why we do it.
And that's sort of indicative of one of the core struggles with PvP design is there's kind of 2 audiences even among the PvP community.
Yes.
There's the high end, the really hardcore arena or rated battleground crowd that they really just care about pushing rating. They want to be at the top. They want to play super competitively.
Yes.
They want to have all of that stuff available to them immediately because that's not the game to them. Getting that stuff isn't the game to them. But on the other hand, you have people who I'll use myself as an example because this was totally me back in Cataclysm, where I would play and I would gear up a character, and once I geared up a character, I actually was like, well, I guess there's no reason for me to play. I don't want to push rating on this character.
Right.
I know I'm bad. I don't need the proof that I'm bad.
Yep.
I want to play a different character now because there's no real reason for me to continue playing the same one now that I'm fully geared out, and the prestige system kind of helps with that a lot. So yeah, I think it's an important thing to just generally keep in mind. A lot of times we have to do stuff that we know isn't the perfect answer for the super hardcore rated crowd, but it dramatically helps that other audience a lot, and vice versa as well. We obviously make changes in the other direction
the
too.
important element here is just World of Warcraft is a role-playing game, and there has to be character progression systems in that, and this PvP is no different. Making a PvP game in a character progression role-playing game, these are some of the things you live with.
Yep.
And honestly, it's some of the things that people love. So.
Yeah, definitely. Moving on, next question here comes from Dan's, who asked, will PvP talents change every season, or will any changes be made to it if necessary, or just talents in general?
I think what's cool about PvP talents is this question. Yes, we certainly plan on looking at the PvP talents on a regular basis and replacing ones that just aren't fun or no one's using or any situation like that. So it's not that we are going to say every season change all the PvP talents.
Right.
That's not going to happen, but certainly it'll be a thing where we feel like we have an opportunity here to provide new kind of content. A lot of PvP is just about class design and class power. So being able to provide PvP specific ones through the honor talents is definitely a good opportunity for us.
Do we? I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Do we actually reset PvP talents between seasons?
We don't. That's actually a really good question because I don't think it's very clear.
Okay.
The way Prestige works is every season we add more prestige levels. Initially, you're prestige level 0. You honor level 1. You level up to level 50, and then you can press the prestige button.
Yeah.
And you can do that up to prestige level 4 for the first season. We'll then add another 4 prestige levels.
Cool.
We didn't want to take stuff away.
Right. Yeah.
We didn't want to say, okay, everybody's reset to level 1, right? Because that could be aggravating. And so we're just going to be adding levels. So the first season has 4, and then each season we'll be aiming to add more.
That's cool. So it means if you're chasing the prestige system, now you can hit that reset button. You can start again.
Yes.
And you can continue working up to that next prestige level. But if you're not, if you just want to push top rating or whatever, you're basically starting out the season quote unquote fully geared.
Yes.
More or less. You don't have to go through that process.
If there's someone who just wants to stay at honor level 50 for the entire expansion, they can.
Yeah. If you don't care about the prestige rewards and you just want to push rating, you can do that. That's awesome. Next question comes from Palantir, who asked, it's been 3 years since the last Battleground was added to the game. Do you have any plans to add new Battlegrounds in the future?
Yeah, this is a good question.
Rated Ashran?
Entirely fair. Okay, Rated Ashran on the way. Josh asked for it. It's been too long, I agree. This is not a good place to be in. I think In Warlords, a lot of the PvP focus was on Ashran. I know a lot of people who are hardcore arena community did not like it. There are a lot of people who did like Ashran. I know that's hard to believe, Twitch chat, but we see the
we
data.
have the math.
Yes. So that was where a lot of our community. For Legion, a lot of our PvP designer time was spent on creating all these honor talents. And we felt like, hey, we're creating this whole new honor system for people that hopefully will provide, good content for them. But I agree that, and we've certainly, we have 2 new arenas, Ashmane's Fall and Blackrock Hold Arena that are coming. We may or may not hint at the fact that an old favorite is getting a facelift fairly soon. And so there's some good stuff going on for arenas for sure. I think we've done a good job with arenas. We have not done a good job with Battlegrounds and getting new Battlegrounds. One of the challenges with Battlegrounds is we already have a lot of them. So to add new ones, we probably need to cycle out some old ones, which I'm sure some people would welcome. But we should make more Battlegrounds. It's something I am having a lot of conversations about. How are we going to get it done? How are we going to make it happen and make it happen more regularly? So I agree. We need more.
Cool. I'm still pulling for old school Ring of Valor, like the original Ring of Valor.
Yeah.
To come, just because I was playing a Rep Paladin at the time, and so that was the only way I could get
those elevators caused a lot of problems.
Oh yeah. It was. Yeah, let's just move on.
Yeah,
Next question comes from Oladastrum, who asked, do you plan to take a more aggressive stance against cheating, such as kickbotting, fly hacking, and scripting in rated PvP, such as more frequent ban waves and wiping achievements or rewards from suspended accounts?
Yeah, this is a great question. I know it's something our community cares a lot about. We also care a lot about it. There's a lot of conversations going on right now about how we communicate what we're doing, how we tell people that we do care. It certainly is the case that we have a very committed and dedicated group of people whose full-time job it is to look at what players are doing, what players are misbehaving, and to punish them, to get them out of the game. We're reviewing some of our policies about a lot of repeat offenders right now. It's probably, when someone is demonstrating that they are committed to cheating in our game, we don't want them in our game. Yeah. And so that is kind of, we're taking steps towards that. Yeah. Another thing with these cheats is just finding ways to prevent them. We don't want the only answer to be punish people. Right. So there's a lot of effort being put into fixing these things. Yeah. Kickbotting is a difficult challenge because we've tried, the fact that interrupts are not on the global cooldown means that you can do them at any time. Yeah. And that poses a challenge because the rest of the game doesn't work that way. We've considered taking them off the global cooldown. It didn't feel good. It's kind of like the genie's out of the bottle now. Yeah. So that's just not an option. So we are, looking at ways to prevent that stuff at all times. So certainly, like I said, don't cheat. There are people who are looking for you. The most notorious cheaters, we know who they are. Yeah. We keep an extra eye on them. And, all I can say to this question is, yes, we care very much about it. And we're doing what we can to prevent it.
And it's probably worth mentioning as well, a lot of the times it sounds like we're being really cagey or really quiet, and we're sort of trying to say things without saying things. In a way, we are kind of trying to say things without saying things, because a big part of the battle against people that use these third-party hacks and scripts is making sure they don't know exactly what we're doing.
Absolutely.
So as soon as they figure out what we're doing to detect them, they can figure out ways to work around that, and it's this big arms race, which doesn't really do anything other than make a bunch of people spend a whole bunch of time for no real actual benefit in the game. So we try to keep it kind of to ourselves and not show our hand too much with exactly what we're doing. But I've seen a lot of exactly what we're doing, so I can say from my personal perspective, I know that there's a heavy commitment towards that. Moving on, question here from Griever, who asked, why remove engineering toys from random battlegrounds?
Yes, that's a good question. I think we've always had kind of the stance that random battlegrounds are a little more fancy free than say rated Battlegrounds, and so we've let a lot of engineering toys in there. I think this is probably just kind of an oversight. We, like I said, the PvP stat system is new in Legion, and part of that was, hey, we're going to remove like enchants and those sorts of things, and engineering toys ended up being enchants on gear. So we have to talk about this and look at what we can do to maybe bring them back, if it's possible to bring them back technically. So I apologize for that. That I don't think was really intentional change, and perhaps they'll come back in the future.
Okay, cool. Next question comes from Rip Van Tickle. It's an excellent name.
Nice, I like it.
Well done. Who asked, as someone inexperienced with PvP, but interested in playing during Legion, how do you think you've managed to make PvP more accessible while also keeping PvP satisfying for grizzled veterans? And I know I saw a couple other questions that were along these lines, basically saying, how am I going to be able to get into PvP with all these new systems and not just immediately get dominated by a bunch of pros that really know what they're doing?
Yeah, so there's two things that we've done. One we've talked about a bit today, which was the PvP stat templates, kind of like normalizing gear and making it a lot more accessible from a power curve standpoint. The other thing that we're doing that's different than we've done before is we're using that honor level as kind of a gauge of experience. This won't probably be until about maybe 2 to 3 weeks into launch. But if you are not, if you're prestige level 0 below honor level 10, you're going to be placed in a separate bucket from everybody else for random battlegrounds, skirmish, everything.
That's cool.
Because we have the thing is, when you look at experience in anything, it's always kind of a curve, like a bell curve and whatnot. And there's a lot of new people trying it, and so we'll have a good bucket of people who have not really done PvP yet, and so we'll be able to kind of put them all together, let them kind of get their ground and figure things out, and then before moving into the general population above level 10.
That's awesome. Yeah, a lot of people have asked for quite a while now for gear-based matchmaking in PvP. With the gear systems in Legion, basing that on gear doesn't really make sense, but this is kind of similar, where now if I'm just starting into PvP, now I don't get matched against somebody who's prestige level 1,000 and just going to...
And it's always tricky because with any matchmaking system, every time you add another bucket, you reduce the player population and you make queues longer. So this is a very sensitive thing to try. It's why we aren't doing like 3 buckets. Like, oh, here's the really experienced bucket and here's the like not experienced at all bucket. Because there's a lot of inexperienced, like new people. There's not a lot of, 4th prestige level people.
Right. Yeah. Okay, let's move on. Next question comes from Marcus, who asked, what is your vision for tanks going forward, and will we see them being competitive in 3v3? You kind of mentioned tanks a little bit at the start when we were talking about class balance. What's going on there?
Yeah, certainly. I think it's a situation where we want players who are tanks to feel like they can go have fun in PvP. But not at the detriment of everybody else.
Right.
The way,
I remember the 3 Blood Knight, 3 Blood Death Knight, 3v3.
Yeah. So there's a number of things. First, in Legion now you have to declare what your spec is, your role before you queue. So are you a healer, are you a tank, are you DPS? It will not be possible to bring 2 healers or 2 tanks into a 3v3 arena anymore. So that won't happen. There's, I think, something to be said here towards like what being competitive in 3v3 means. I think our player base gets very anxious when tanks kind of become the preferred spec at high-level 3v3s. Right. We saw this, the way people reacted when Gladiator stance warriors were very, very strong at the beginning of Warlords. Like, why are these tanks the best like class? So very kind of like watching that and trying to say like, well, we'll just make them exactly balanced. Well, this is game design, and that's a very hard thing to do. So what we want them is to be in a situation where like, if you feel like you're a tank and you want to go do some arenas with your friends, you can be very good. And you can, especially if you're a very good tank, and you can go in there and have fun. I don't know if we want it to get to a point where at the high end, everybody's playing tanks in 3v3 arena.
Might not see a prop paladin at BlizzCon, but you can still see them on the ladder.
Right. And battlegrounds, rated battleground situations, that's different. I think it would be very good if every high rated battleground team felt compelled to bring a tank.
Yeah.
There's 10 slots in there for one of them to be a tank. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Whether it's as flag carrier or some things we're trying is we'd really like to see them as kind of like your frontline target caller. I think it would be really cool if your tanks were your target callers and everybody was like, he's in there in the mix.
Yeah.
And, he's not the greatest target to get because he has so many skills to survive, but it's really cool to like see him like picking a target, getting on them, and everybody collapsing.
He's in there
on that
being
target.
disruptive, like interrupting healers and stuff.
Kind of like you see in a lot of like Heroes of the Storm like games with or Overwatch, like how the tank is the front line.
Yeah.
warrior. We like that idea. So I that would be a cool place. I don't know if we're there, but certainly we make changes to their survivability, the amount of damage they do, to make sure that they are not like everybody's a tank type of a situation.
Cool. Let's move on. Next question comes from Undeath Metal on Twitter, who asked, will you ever consider making old PvP lake zones? I'm not sure what a lake zone is, but okay. Maybe like PvP like zones. Maybe that's a typo. Not sure. Anyway, old PvP zones such as Wintergrasp, Queuable, or similar to Ashran.
So I know PvP lake zone must be underwater PvP zone.
Splashran?
Confirmed. Splashran confirmed. So I think we're, it's one of those things with Wintergrass, Tolbarad, Ashran, that they were kind of meant to be like a world PvP zone for like that period of time. And then maybe a little bit afterwards, and then they kind of go away. That's certainly with Ashran, like it was the Warlords PvP feature. We're still kind of allowing it to be relevant in Legion, but eventually, we'll just let it kind of slip away. But I see the value in the kind of nostalgia of like, oh, I loved Wintergrass. I want to go back to there, kind of like I want to go back to South Shore and Terran Mill.
Yeah.
There are things we're talking about in the future, the somewhat semi-near future, for kind of finding ways to provide new kind of freshness. One of the things in terms of fresh content for PvP, one of the things I saw feedback I saw very often in Warlords was, I don't have anything to do, and I can agree with that. Like if there's nothing new coming out, there's nothing new to get excited about. And so, like, hey, it could be cool if one week it was like, we're all going to go to Wintergrasp, and that could be cool. So that is something we're kind of talking about now, and see what we can do in the future.
It's also, like, not really directly related, but maybe worth calling out the, like, PvP zone things happening in Legion, like the
free-for-all PvP zones.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's true. We created 4 free-for-all PvP zones out in the world. They're kind of part of the World Quest system, where if you go to them, you're marked free-for-all, so you're hostile to anyone who's not in your party. And every one of them has a different hook. One of them is kind of a Splashran themed area where you can turn into a Murloc, into a third faction, the Murlocs.
Interesting.
And fight other players. Or there's another area where you can kill the creatures and tame them and mount them. And so we have mounted PvP combat in a part of Stormheim. Then we also have the Blackrock Hold arena out in the world is a kind of Royal Rumble where you just jump in and all fight each other and earn points. So there's a couple cool new type of PvP experiences you can get through the World Quest system.
Cool. Next question. This is actually kind of similar to the last question. It comes from Griever, who asked, are there any plans to revisit some of the older Battlegrounds layouts? For example, changing Warsong Gulch so the rocks and trees in the middle actually provide line of sight.
Yeah, I feel like this is something we have to be like super careful about. There are people who love Warsong Gulch, love Arathi Basin, and have forever. And changing them is, you have to do it in a way such that it feels very much the same.
Yeah. I remember when the graveyards in Warsong Gulch were lowered, that was a very contentious change.
Exactly. Yeah, and so you have to respect that, and like sometimes we feel like a change is necessary for whatever reason, so we do it. But certainly in this situation, I kind of agree. The rocks and trees not providing blocking line of sight
It is a little bit weird.
It's very weird. They're very big.
Yeah.
You know, if they were like small bushes, whatever, but they're really big.
Yeah.
So that's certainly something we can look at. But revisiting older Battleground layouts, it's like I could see them getting kind of like a visual update, but we don't want to mess too much with their layouts and anger people. Probably what would be better would be take that gameplay and do a new version of it on another map.
Okay, cool. Question here from Glamia, who asked, are there any upcoming changes to fix the current mobility issues in Legion PvP, giving a preference to nerfing melee mobility instead of buffing casters? I know there's a couple of classes that are considered to be extremely mobile melee classes right now. It's actually difficult for casters to get away from them. How do you feel about that?
Yeah. So the first part would be, I think, people generally say melee mobility, and I feel like they're talking about very specific specs.
Yeah.
Like
nobody's complaining about Death Knights.
Exactly. Like melee mobility on all mobilities, all melee specs is not really the same. The ones where it is very high are where mobility is a really core part of the fantasy and kit. You know, demon hunters are supposed to be like flying all over the place, rushing, jumping. The monks are supposed to be rolling all the time, and doing flying serpent kick and whatnot. So all those things are like kind of core parts in fantasy of their fantasy. However, like kind of all the systems we have in place in this expansion, talents, honor talents, artifact traits, it's kind of delivering on the fantasy is like we've kind of power creeped a little bit, and so a lot of the mobility is very high. So what we're going to do is we're going to have to compensate for that. If a class has very high uptime, then the amount of damage that they can do has to go down. That it's a little bit different from PvE and PvP, where I think the target in PvP is always moving. In PvE, a tank is wrangling it. Maybe you're going to a new ad pack that's moving, but the mobility tools are not as like the spectrum of mobility the spectrum of damage that mobility provides is a little bit less in PvE than in PvP. So we have to do that. So and also there are just certain spells, like let's talk about Shadow Strike and Subtlety Rogues, that the teleport on that ability offers a lot more power in PvP, than it does in PvE.
Right.
They, for them to use it, a lot of times
in PvE, you're already standing next to the boss.
Exactly.
Anyway. Yeah.
So in order for you to use that, it has to have a lot of damage value. Whereas in PvP, that teleport is like
that's kind of the
whole
bit.
Damage value, right? So that spell, we've taken the damage down on that spell down considerably in PvP, such that really the benefit is the teleport.
Right.
So I think the way we're going to do that is we're going to take our PvP tuning knobs. We're going to bring down the damage of all those specs that have a lot of uptime, such that their damage is just not what it is. Now, there's also disruption, stuns, interrupts, all those types of things that we also have to take into account. If they can provide a lot of lockdown, they can't provide a lot of damage. And so I think what you're just going to see is those people get nerfed. If their mobility is very high, their damage is just going to go down.
And that's just kind of part of PvP balance for a long time. Like a lot of times in history, like rogues have been a popular class in arenas for a long time, but at certain points in arena history, it wasn't for their damage at all. It was because they were locking down the kill target, so that the mage or whoever else could kill it. So, lots of ways that can be tuned. Good to hear that it's on the radar. Question here from Sully DK on Twitter, who asked, with Arena Master being gone, will there be another achievement or title to take its place? This was another one that we saw a lot of questions about, just talking about Arena Master in general, but is there something coming to replace Arena Master?
Yeah, I feel like this was a fairly recent change. So if anyone's not familiar, Arena Master is an achievement back, like one of the earliest achievements that offered you the title Arena Master when you hit certain rating marks in 2v2, 3v3, and 5v5. And there was a number like getting hotter and all that also did.
Yeah.
We removed the 5v5 bracket in Legion primarily because their 3v3 is our main like gameplay target bracket for PvP tuning.
Right.
2v2 and 5v5 don't necessarily offer the gameplay experience perfectly. However, 2v2 is very popular, and a lot of people do it. 5v5 is very unpopular, and almost no one does it. It's like there's less people doing 5v5 than rated Battlegrounds. There's less people doing 5v5 than Mythic Rating. People do not do 5v5. It was time for it to retire. The Arena Master achievement, it would be wrong to just remove the 5v5 requirement from that achievement and make it, such a thing that like somebody who did that in the past, now all of a sudden
they lose their badge of honor.
Yeah, it's like other people did it when it wasn't quite it didn't take as much.
Yeah,
and that's not right. So we're going to retire that achievement and put it into Legacy. But should there be something else? Yeah, I think we could come up with another achievement, another title, and that's something we should do. But it's not right to just allow people to get Arena Master more easily.
Okay, that makes sense. Question from Loki, who asked, where do you see the importance of non-rated play in comparison to rated play? Is the goal to funnel more PvP play into rated combat rather than having most people play in random BGs?
I don't think they're both very important. I don't think we are trying to drive everybody to rated play. We think it's better when more people do it, like for what we mentioned before.
Yeah.
It's better if we have more people participating. We think there is a good benefit to having kind of like this place where if you care a little bit more about winning, you can go. And that's kind of what rated play offers. And we think that's a cool and good experience. So we think it offers more, and we like our players having more things to do in World of Warcraft. So in that sense, it's good. I think it's totally fine for somebody to just want to do random Battlegrounds, just want to do skirmish, just want to do Ashran or whatnot.
Right.
So that's fine. And we like this whole system that we've built. Almost everything we're doing in Legion is really benefits them most. I mean, it benefits hardcore players who want all these tuning knobs and want a very balanced game. But it really was primarily aimed at making the experience better for someone who just likes to queue Battlegrounds or just queue it. We've given them more to do. We've given them prestige system. We've given them cool rewards. So
cool. All right. We are running out of time, so I know we have a lot of questions that we haven't gotten to. Let's just try and
lightning round it.
Just lightning round it. Yeah, we'll just go as quickly as possible. Question from Steel Schmango 65 asks, what will world PvP be like if BGs set players to a specific item level? Will raiders have the edge like in MoP?
Don't want them to have the edge. There's a little bit of trust us. We've done the math that will make sure this doesn't happen.
Okay.
But I understand the perception.
Okay. Next question. Oops, that's the previous question. There we go. From Sandolph, who asks, can you make mage PvP cooldowns undispellable like other classes have? There's no justification to keep combustion, icy veins, and arcane power dispellable. Well, we can't dispel, for example, avenging wrath or ascendance.
Making spells undispellable is kind of one of the tools that we've used in the past to balance classes one way or the other. Okay. So don't know the reason that happened, but it may be for good reason.
Okay. And it's probably worth mentioning as well that sometimes things are different with different classes for specific reasons. Next question comes from J. Vincent Bennett on Twitter. Can we get more detail on prestige rewards, ranks, titles, transmogs, badges? This may be a difficult one to lightning round. But
I was actually saying I want to kill lightning rounds because I really wanted to talk about this actually. Cool. So prestige level, the way it works is honor level is 1 to 50. You start at prestige level 0. And the reward at level 50 changes with every prestige level. Okay. So initially, when you hit honor level 50, you get a worm tongue for back of the letter word groupie. This is like a battle pet that is like your biggest fan.
Okay.
He's a little worm tongue guy, and he follows you around and talks to everybody about how awesome you are. Once you hit honor level 50 again, there's a cool little kind of quest line that grants you a second artifact appearance for PvP. And then when you prestige again, you have, I believe, what's the courser mount, which is our not unicorn horned horses. So you can get a mount at prestige level 2. I think prestige level 3 is one of our honorable pennants, which is a new type of toy that we've got. The pennants that you're familiar with in arenas that are on your back to show your team, which, by the way, have been up-resed and configured so they don't clip through all the races. And actually, as your rating improves, they get more and more ornate.
Oh, cool.
Those, we have a little toy that puts one of those on your back with like the Stormwind flag, so it's very faction oriented, and or Horde puts the Orgrimmar thing on there. So those are really cool, and they get more ornate as the prestige level goes up. And then prestige level 3 is a title. That has, I believe it's the prestigious, and there will be titles. So there's titles, there's toys, there's mounts, and we'll be trying to do that every season to give new stuff.
Cool. Next question then comes from Kelva Qatar on Twitter, who asked, will we ever see the ability to pre-form cross-faction parties for BG and arenas?
Yep. Short answer is no. I don't really ever see that happening in the future. I think when you ask somebody finds out, oh, you play World of Warcraft. Like, what's the first question? Horde or Alliance?
Horde? Yeah.
It's Horde or Alliance.
And
Horde and Alliance, that is so important to what makes World of Warcraft special that we're never going to, we don't want to violate that.
Right.
You know, like in the case of like rated arenas, that's different. But we want rated arenas and rated battlegrounds. We need pretty good queues. But in this situation, we just don't want people kind of crossing faction lines like that.
Well, that's why mercenary mode was mercenary
mode,
because it had to come across as a way where, like, yes, you are,
and preserve that faction.
Okay, this might have to be our last question. It comes from Traffy, who asked, are you concerned with classes being too reliant on burst cooldowns and less reliant on skillful crowd control timing?
Yep. Certainly something we keep a radar on. Those cooldowns are meant to make you feel scary. Like, oh, gosh, the damage is coming, and have to answer with other cooldowns of your own.
Yeah, like if I'm ever casting an arena match and I don't feel like it's important to call out that the Warlock used Dark Soul, that's kind of a problem.
Yeah, exactly. And so on one hand, it's cool to have classes that are very bursty and they have windows that are a lot of pressure. And it's cool to have other classes where their sustained pressure is very high.
Yeah.
So I think, but at the other hand, we don't want it to be a situation where the game only matters every 3 minutes. And then we can all go chill out. We're just all going to wait for cooldowns. It's important that you can continue to put pressure on healers throughout the other time. Let mana be a game. We have the ability to tune mana now, just for PvP. So hopefully we can get back to a point where healer mana feels like kind of a measuring stick of how the game is going.
Cool. All right. Well, that is all the time that we have today. I know that you have a meeting to rush off to. I think I'm in the same meeting.
Yes,
so,
yeah.
We should probably get off to that. But thanks so much, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you, Brian, for coming by here today to answer these questions. Next week, we will have Craig Amai in here talking about artifacts and order halls. He's been very closely related to both of those systems and features coming into the game. Very
awesome.
Focused on like the quest line side of it as well, and the storyline. So we will get our blog posts and forum posts up very soon to accept those questions. You can also send them in with #LegionQA. Again, next week we're going to be talking about artifacts and order halls with Craig Amai. But yeah, thanks again, Brian, for being here today. Thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. And we will see you guys later.
Bye-bye.